I'm Chris from Enumclaw. I've spoken in front of many of you before, but I'm going to repeat the story again. I've been asked to speak at these meetings because I'm a real living example of how the county has gotten this wrong with regard to growers and producers. I want to be clear, this is not an argument or a lack of support for legalization of marijuana. I am actually in support of that. Nor is this a personal vendetta against my neighbor. He, for the most part, has been a very decent guy to deal with. Regardless of how we feel about our neighbor, that doesn't change the fact that we fear on a daily basis our security and our safety, as well as retaliation for speaking out about our concerns. We live in Enumclaw Plateau area. We've been there for several years. A little over a year ago, our neighbor bought the small farm next to us. It was an existing barn, small house. We share a very long private easement. There was a property line adjustment when he purchased the home, and so we had to get involved in his transaction. During all this time, we'd interacted with his realtors only and asked him what he was planning on doing with the property. We were advised that he was going to use it just as a small farm like our previous owners were, have a couple of animals on it. Shortly after that, he enclosed the barn, expanded the footprint of the barn, took all the doors and windows off, installed 220 power, put a 12-foot metal fence around the property. We asked him why he was doing that. He had advised us that at that point he was moving his computer repair business out to the property. We know that can't be true because you don't need 220 power to run a computer. So we confronted him on that as we found on the internet finally through the website that he was a grower. We asked him why he didn't tell us. He told us he was advised not to. So that says that we've had deception from the get-go with our neighbor. So we are impacted daily by what's going on. This is approximately 100 feet maybe from our house. Our property value's been harmed. We've talked to realtors about it. We originally bought this house with, excuse me, I asked for levity on my time here, if I may. We bought the home with the intention of being our retirement home and being on New Whatcom Creek. We now have to reconsider that because we don't know who's going to want to buy our property. That's a very concerning issue to us. We have the noise.
And if I can ask you to
smell.
conclude, please.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you this. Our property is in the Farm Preservation Program. Right. This is the Farm Preservation Program was something King County put in place in the 70s that bought everybody's development rights. It says clearly, agricultural use only. The legislators were clear with the statutes. Marijuana is not agriculture, and nor will it be. But yet the county has allowed this to be put into agriculturally sensitive properties. As I've said before, the county has effectively taken our home from us. It took it without hesitation, without emotion, and without regret. And we ask you to solve that problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. What do oil wells, automobile assembly lines, and marijuana production have in common? The answer is they're all manufacturing processes that provide products that consumers want. And they all have no business in residential communities. And I don't believe anybody here would want any of those things next door to your own home. Well, we don't either, and we live in the rural King County area, and we don't believe that belongs near our homes. We're not a bunch of narrow-minded old folks who are anti-marijuana. Most of us grew up in the 60s. We don't have a problem with the law. We just think it needs to be cited appropriately, and there need to be reasonable restrictions that work for everyone. As Chris said, it's not considered agriculture. There's no good reason for it to be among the cows and the horses and the trees and the families. It belongs in secure warehouses that can support the anticipated and known issues we already know about that are disruptive to neighborhoods. For instance, traffic, the stench. The stench is not like a typical marijuana smell. It's more like a skunk. It's horrible. Noise pollution from the fans, light pollution because of the required lighting, local water and wildlife pollution in their environment, and the potential for crime. And yes, crime is a real problem associated with it. It's not an exaggeration or a paranoia. I'm a retired police officer with more than 30 years on the job, and I know this to be true. These facilities belong in an industrial setting. Please don't let our only recourse be to hire attorneys in an attempt to keep our neighborhoods rural and safe as intended. We plead with you to put into place reasonable restrictions on where these manufacturing operations can be located, and we sincerely thank you for your careful consideration on this issue.
I invite you, all of you, please come out and visit our rural residential areas. And I do so Since our last meeting that we attended here, I found out that there's a grow that is in application process next door to me. It's to the south of me. The prevailing wind would put whatever smells emitted from that to cross my property line and be a problem to me. Let me tell you, I did visit a growing operation that is down about half a mile away. Also, between my house and that one, there's another one in application process. I moved out there and set up a Christmas tree farm for my family, thinking that we would have normal progression of land value. The more work I put into it, the more value it becomes. I find with a neighbor with a growing operation, another neighbor across the draw, very narrow draw, with probably an approved one in the short foreseeable future, I see problems in the value of my property. Let's say my property was valued at $800,000 to start with. I see maybe $400,000 value at the present time if those things are allowed to be in operation. Now that's at best, if it's even saleable at all. Do you see what picture I'm drawing? I'm going to be hurting come retirement time. I'm retired from my job, but I'm not retired from my work and my love, which is my tree farm. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
I did have to smile a bit when I said reading this and declaring an emergency. That's what it is to us. It is an emergency. This is our neighborhoods that are being basically decorated with these industry production facilities that belong in an industrial area. As you've heard before, none of us are trying to get rid of this marijuana law. We're just asking that you put an industry in industrial zones, not in residential neighborhoods. And that's what I live on. I'm on a street with 9 homes. At the end of that street are 5 acres with a nice barn. I'm just waiting for someone to come along and offer my neighbor a nice bit of money so with that land they can start a pot production, therefore lowering my property values, having it where I can't go outside like the rest of my neighbors are. And we've got children on the street. You don't allow this around schools. Why do you allow it in neighborhoods where there's children all the time? Once again, we're not asking for anything but that you would have in your own neighborhoods, get rid of an industry that produces noise, odor, possible crime, and once again, the loss of property value. You wouldn't want it in your neighborhood. Why should we have it in ours? That's all we're asking. Reading the statement, once again, most of you have heard this before, but King County does not recognize marijuana production as agriculture, but public belief that it's just farming, and this cannot be further from the truth. It is an industry. I just ask that you put this business in an industrial area where it belongs. Odor, noise, round-the-clock lighting, security that is required at these grow operations fits much better in an area regulated to manufacturing, not surrounded by homes and the families in them.
I have nothing written today. I spoke to the tree committee mainly on odor, you probably remember. But I really wanted to thank you for this moratorium. As someone mentioned earlier, it is an emergency to us as things are just happening. And we can clearly see the lack of regulations. I will give you a brief synopsis of what's going on in my neighborhood. I live on a 1-lane gravel road. There are only 4 residences. The resident at the end has 10 acres, and he has leased his property to a grower. It is an outdoor grow. It is 30,000 square feet. That's the maximum allowed by the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. They are in process. Their application was declared complete before the moratorium, so they are proceeding. They're proceeding as if it's a slam dunk. The fence is up with no permit, not even an over-the-counter permit. The greenhouse is up with no permit, and Department of Permitting is telling us that we can file a complaint with code enforcement. Well, we've been sued by these people before, and we are all very intimidated by doing that. We know that Deeper can bring their own enforcement action against them, and that's where it needs to go. We are definitely, this is not a pleasant situation. We fear. Unfortunately, we fear. And again, I want to thank you very much for this serious consideration of our concerns, because we are living this nightmare. Thank you.
My name is Lorna Ruffner, and I'm also a resident of the Enumclaw Plateau. We have about 145 homeowners now who work together to battle the issues around crime. A number of you may remember that I also spoke at Ravensdale. During that time, I want you to know that we were just so thankful that you did do this emergency moratorium, and we really appreciate it. And should you not be able to rectify this in your minds in the next 4 months, I hope that you will consider extending that moratorium another 4 months. In addition, I want you to know I used to be a City of Kent police captain. I worked there for nearly 30 years. After the meeting that I had with you all, I went to Tom Brubaker, who's the city attorney of Kent. As you may know, they are one of the first cities to ban this from the get-go. I believe it's you, sir, that represents the Kent area. One of the things that he told me, and I thought this would be very powerful information for you to all think about in terms of this, because we've been hearing how law enforcement cannot do their jobs under the current conditions because we have too vast of an area and we don't have enough officers, and we are going to reduce funding here in the future, correct? So I asked him, I said, well, how do you guys deal with the marijuana grows? And he said, well, you know, there's the ban, but guess what? It doesn't really help, because our narcotics detectives and our code enforcement get numerous complaints every day about marijuana and the stench of marijuana, and that's in residential areas. So they are working hard to deal with this issue, but he said it's overwhelming. So if we can't fix a problem like this in terms of putting this in our neighborhoods, and they can't do it in the cities because medical marijuana is very vague, very out of control, how are we going to fix this, folks? We need your help. We need you to seriously consider all of the options. All the other counties have done it, and they've done it pretty darn well. And I thank you for listening.
And I am from the Enumclaw Plateau. Not much of a speaker, but interested in keeping our Enumclaw area free of the marijuana in our backyards. Thank you for listening to us today. Our purpose here is to hope that you can consider this moratorium and extend it until we have more time to look. We would like to know or encourage you, if any of you have been out in our Enumclaw area, have you been to any of these grows so that you know what's going on? Can you see the lighting? Can you smell the marijuana? Can you see what's happening to our rural farm area? Please come out and discover what's going on around our area. Many of you live here and hear what goes on, but seeing is believing. And our children are smelling this smell, which is not good. I would encourage you to do that if you could for us. Also, I'm wondering if there are any inspections for these marijuana grows. Farmers have inspections all the time. They have to live up to things that need to be done. Is that allowed? Are there inspections? So please take our promise to continue to fight this and consider extending the moratorium and letting us know that you really care about us rural areas. Thank you.
Member of Kent Education Association, Sound Alliance, and I represent the young families in rural King County. I moved my family into the Maple Valley community 13 years ago. I moved there because it was a rural area and I was trying to escape crime. I work in an inner city school. However, 6 out of the 7 neighbors have had our homes broken into, our garages, cars, sheds, mailboxes, and for some of us, we have been hit twice. Rural does not mean there is no crime in our area. We have crime. I have witnessed drug deals taking place under the Highway 18 overpass right down the street. When we call the sheriff, we are told that there is nothing they can do. All of this is happening with industrial marijuana growth operations at our heels, and we have been told time and time again by law enforcement that it will only get worse when it finally moves in. Industrial marijuana growth operations is currently unmonitored and unregulated. One growth operation currently pays cash under the table for harvesting buds. On a Saturday, people show up, snip buds, and walk out with cash. I am told $600 for 2 hours worth of work. People who are desperate for cash turn to crime. Our properties are at an increased risk with industrial growth marijuana operations in residential neighborhoods. Our safety is at risk. Our children are at risk. I support no industrial growth marijuana operations in residential areas, and I support Mr. Dunn's moratorium as the first step to this process. This is the second time that our neighbors are fighting this, and I'd like to know how many times do we need to fight this fight? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Serino. I'm also a member of Kent Education Association and the Sound Alliance and concerned homeowner in the area. Undoubtedly, this is going to have a negative effect on property values. The majority of people, as has been said before, would not choose to live next door to these places, dealing with the smell, fan noise, fences 8 to 12 feet high. I know my wimpy little fence is only 6 feet, but it's a wood fence and meant to keep my dog in. The crime, traffic. While we were out walking the dog, there was a person who pulled up next to us and started asking us questions. And he said he was an investor and wanted to develop 26 acres that are in Hobart and Issaquah. And he started asking us how we liked the area and so forth. And we told him about the current growing operation and what's been going on. And he became very concerned. He fell in love with the neighborhoods up to 44th at the end of the street there that are beautiful, wealthy homes and very open yards and so forth. And so he was looking at that to model. And now he's rethinking that decision because of concern that when he starts this, there will be no stopping the person, next door from creating a growth operation. I work with colleagues who have young children and are constantly asking me about where I live and very interested in living in a rural setting because it's a great place to raise a family. And unfortunately, when I bring up the topic of the growth operations that are coming up and the potential of that, they no longer have interest in looking in those areas. So I think it's definitely going to affect the future of our area and, trying to keep young families from moving out to those areas and continuing the growth in a positive sense. Thank you.
I do want to say that my wife and I had established, we've had neighborhood meetings, over 100 people because of a theft problem last year. And so we created this email network to communicate with each other. So we got well over 100 people communicating now, and I can tell you that the feeling is unanimous about the concern for the impacts of marijuana operations, because we do have several in our immediate area. The only other points, I made this point, or these points to the subcommittee, the tree subcommittee, a couple of weeks ago, that over the years, King County's done a lot to preserve the agricultural and rural nature, the pastoral nature of unincorporated King County, including the A10 and A35 building, minimum building requirements. And think in terms of residential. That just doesn't mean agricultural. That's residential lots. That's where we live. Buying development rights to preserve farmland, various open spaces taxation relief programs, farm management plans, enforcement of the critical areas ordinance. You've done a lot. And having these marijuana growing operations just seems to be a great contradiction with all that the council has done in the past to preserve the nature of our unincorporated King County. So to to us, it really kind of boils down to just a couple of key points, and you've heard it before today. These are industrial processes with industrial impacts. They don't belong in our residential neighborhoods, whether they're urban or rural. They don't belong where people live. They belong in warehouses. They belong in industrial and commercial zoned areas. And many other jurisdictions have recognized this and have set regulations accordingly. So we're very thankful for the moratorium, and we ask you to continue it until you do have regulations that are appropriate and really protect us as you should. So thank you very much for that.
I live in Redmond Ridge. I represent a very worried community about the possible reduction of the boundaries of the 1,000 feet to 100 feet. And we are worried, although we talked about this on May 18th, that two large warehouses with a total surface of 85,000 square feet were built in Redmond Ridge Business Park. Now it's a new one. It's under construction with 70,000 square feet. The business park is right in the heart of the residential community between Redmond Ridge and Redmond Ridge East, with more than 2,000 houses. We are also worried because the owners of these warehouses actually are turning down kid-friendly businesses from leasing these warehouses, even if they offer lease rates above market rates. Do these owners know something we don't know? We are all learning from Colorado's experience. Large-scale marijuana growing and processing generates very strong odors. They call it skunk-like smells that lingers above entire neighborhoods, disrupting everyday life, causing headaches, getting into people's hair, clothes. Volatile THC molecules, which is the hallucinogen compound in marijuana, is released in the air, and the concentration is proportional with the intensity of the smell. There's a constant noise from the huge fan in the warehouses running 24/7, pushing out the THC and the toxic molecules from the chemicals which are used in huge quantities to grow these marijuana plants 4 or 5 times a year. Within 1,100 feet from the warehouses, right in the business park, we will be built a new middle school. The middle school of a capacity of 900 students. It's already approved. The plan's available on Lake Washington School District website. Within 1,200 feet is Rosa Parks Elementary with 700 students. Within 600 feet, it's a preschool, 2,000 square foot, a private child care center. Would you be comfortable to send your children in school to a close proximity in a facility that actually ruins their entire learning experience, their development, possibly their health? What kind of teacher would be willing to work in such an environment? Would you risk your children's future for a buck? Please consider when you decide about this 1,000 square feet, please keep the 1,000 square feet and even raise it if it's possible, because it's our children's future at stake. Thank you.
And I also live in the Redmond Ridge community, and I'm a mom. I have 2 boys. I have them in sports ever since they were 5, hoping that they will continue that so they won't get into drugs and other things. And we really moved to the area because of the park and the wonderful, healthy environment. My one child has an immune disorder, and that's one reason why we moved there. I don't think some of you were there at the May 18th meeting held in Evergreen Middle School, but there were over 300 attendees there, and most of them were there because of the concerns about the possible reconsideration of zoning for marijuana in the Redmond Ridge area. And I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with the area, but we are an urban planned development similar to Issaquah Highlands. But unlike Issaquah Highlands, their business park is near I-90, the highway, and then most of the single-family homes and so on are up the hill. Ours, we have residential communities that are very close together and packed with small kids. Our elementary schools are bursting at the seams with tons of portables, and it's surrounded. The business park there is surrounded by all of these kids and elderly. One of the largest residential retirement communities, called Trilogy, is neighboring us as well as part of Redmond Ridge community. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, are you planning, because it was a little misunderstood or concerning at the meeting in May, of if you are considering rezoning or changing the setbacks in our community. Thank you.